"I can fix the ferry engines in 2 hours," said the deckhand. The captain laughed, a sharp, exhausted sound. "A deckhand repair twin marine diesels? This is not a cartoon." When a deckhand stands on the bridge of a crippled ferry and calmly says he can fix both engines in 2 hours, the silence that follows reveals exactly what everyone thinks of him. Captain Richard Blackstone, iron captain to the harbour gossip, stood in the middle of the Island Queen's bridge, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched. Alarms blinked red across the console. Outside the windows, grey water stretched in every direction. The shoreline was a hazy line miles away. "We've got 300 passengers, both mains offline, and we're drifting toward the shipping lane," he snapped into the radio. "And you're telling me your only certified mechanic is busy until tomorrow morning?" Static, apologies, useless assurances. "I'll lose my license over this," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. "The Coast Guard will crucify me. The authority will fire me. One collision, and we're on every news channel in the country." On one monitor, a simple graphic showed the reality. The Island Queen, a small icon, slowly sliding across charts toward thick red lines marking the main route for deep draft cargo ships. Behind him, the chief mate and second mate argued in low, tense voices about anchoring depth, tug availability, and the speed of drift. "We can drop both anchors and try to hold her," the mate said. "But the bottom here is poor holding, and if a container ship doesn't see us, it'll see us," Blackstone snapped. "We've got AIS, we've got lights, we've got—" "Sir," said a quiet voice from the doorway. Blackstone spun around. A man in oil-streaked coveralls stood at the entrance, cap in his hands, tool bag on his shoulder. Daniel Rodriguez, deckhand and sometime engine room helper for almost 20 years. "Not now, Rodriguez," the captain barked. "Go help calm the passengers." "Captain," Daniel said, voice steady, "I can fix those engines. 2 hours, maybe less." The second mate snorted. Someone in the corner laughed in disbelief. Blackstone stared at him. You think you're going to waltz into the engine room and do what a certified marine engineer can't? This is a pair of Caterpillar 3516s, not a lawnmower." Daniel didn't flinch. He stepped closer to the status panel, eyes flicking over the numbers. "Engine temps spiked, then both shut down on overheat," he said quietly. "Oil pressure was fine before shutdown. Exhaust temps were climbing together." "We can read the logs too," the mate said. Daniel shook his head. "If the engines themselves were damaged, we'd see different errors. What you've got is cooling water starvation. After that storm last night, the kelp fields off Breaker Point are a mess. We ploughed straight through them on the morning run. The intake screens are choking." He looked up. "Clear the intake, flush the seawater lines, bleed the air, reset the shutdowns, and both engines will come back. I've seen it on tugs, on trawlers, and on this boat's sister ship 8 years ago." Blackstone's cheeks reddened. "Do you have an engineering license?" "No, sir." "Coast Guard endorsement as a marine engineer?" "No." "Then what you're suggesting is illegal, reckless, and insane," the captain said. "You're a deckhand. You tie lines, scrub decks, and throw heaving lines. You don't touch propulsion." Daniel's fingers tightened slightly on his cap. "With respect, sir, I've spent 19 years in that engine room. I know the sound of those blocks from the tone of their idle. I know how the deck vibrates when they're happy and when they're hurting. Right now, they're not dead. They're scared." Laughter flickered around the bridge. Someone muttered, "The engines are scared." Before Blackstone could order him out, a woman near the chart table spoke. "Captain," she said, "I'd like to hear more about his assessment." She wore a Coast Guard auxiliary vest over simple clothes, her hair tied back, a visitor badge clipped to her collar. She had been there since departure, quietly taking notes on a tablet. Nobody had paid her much attention, just another federal observer. Blackstone clenched his jaw. "Ma'am, we are in the middle of an emergency. With all due respect." She opened a small wallet and flipped it toward him. The flash of federal insignia and the words "Marine Safety" were unmistakable. "Susan Chen, Coast Guard Marine Safety," she said. "I'm here evaluating your emergency procedures for certificate renewal. I strongly recommend you hear what this man is proposing. Your decisions today go into my report." The bridge chilled another 10 degrees. Blackstone swallowed. "Fine," he said tightly. "Mr. Rodriguez, you have 1 minute. Explain." Daniel took a breath. "These engines have one big weakness. "The seawater intake for the cooling system," he said. "Every time we get a heavy storm and kelp breaks loose, it gets sucked into the intake grates. Normally the screens catch most of it, but if the storm hits on a night before we sail, there's no one watching. We pull away from the terminal, run over a carpet of kelp, and 10 minutes later the cooling system can't breathe." He pointed at the temps on the panel. "See how both engines climb together? That's not a pump failure, that's suction side restriction. If the pumps were bad, we'd see pressure drops, but the pressure held until shutdown." The chief mate frowned. "He's not wrong about the pattern," he admitted quietly. "Sensors saw temperatures spike. Computers did their job, shut everything down," Daniel continued. "Engines did what they were supposed to do to protect themselves. We're the ones who didn't plan ahead." He paused. "I can reach the intake manifold from inside the hull. It's cramped, hot and ugly, but I've been in there. I've pulled kelp out of those screens before on smaller engines. Give me access, someone competent on this panel to watch gauges while I work. And 2 hours." "And if you're wrong," Blackstone asked. "Then we're no worse off than we are now," Daniel said simply, "except I'll be filthy and tired." "Why risk it?" the second mate asked. "You're a deckhand. Let the professionals handle it when they arrive." Daniel's eyes darkened. "My daughter is on this boat," he said. "Deck 2. She's 8 months pregnant. She's going to the mainland for a high-risk obstetric appointment. We're drifting into the shipping channel. If a container ship loses us on radar for 30 seconds or a watchstander blinks at the wrong time, 300 people, my daughter and my grandchild, are statistics." He swallowed. "I'm not going to sit on a bench and hand out life jackets while that happens. Not when I know exactly where the choke point is and how to clear it." That silenced the bridge. Susan watched Daniel for a long moment, then looked at Blackstone. "Captain," she said, "you have a licensed officer and a veteran crewman presenting a coherent, plausible diagnosis with decades of experience behind it. Your contractor mechanic is 12 hours away, minimum. You know the drift, you know the traffic density. Are you truly prepared to say no and explain to 300 families why you chose not to try?" "If he goes in there and ruptures a line, we could flood the engine room," the captain protested. "If he opens a valve wrong, we could scald him. If he hot starts a seized engine, if he does nothing, we are still drifting," Susan interrupted. She stepped closer. "I am not here to tell you how to run your vessel, but I am here to document your judgment. If this man is as experienced as he claims, and you refuse to let him attempt a repair that may save lives and prevent a collision, that's a choice you'll see again in my report." Blackstone looked from her to Daniel, to the chart where their position crept ever so slowly toward danger. 2 hours, he said at last, voice low. "You get 2 hours. You will obey every safety procedure. One misstep, one sign, this is making things worse, and I shut you down. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Daniel said. "Chief, you're on this panel," the captain ordered. "You watch every gauge. If anything goes the wrong way, you shout." The chief mate nodded, already moving. Daniel nodded once more, then turned to go. "Rodriguez," he paused. "If you blow my ship up," Blackstone muttered, "I'll haunt you." Daniel allowed himself a thin smile. "If I blow your ship up, Captain, you won't be the only one." He disappeared down the ladder well. Susan followed at a distance, wanting to see the engine room for herself. Heat intensified with every deck they descended. By the time they reached the machinery spaces, the air was thick with the smell of hot metal, oil, and faint burned coolant. The engine room was a steel cathedral of machinery. 2 massive diesels dominated the space, their bulk painted yellow, silent now but still radiating heat. Alarm lights blinked. The rumble of generators provided a dull background drone. "This is where I live," Daniel said quietly, dropping his tool bag onto a grated walkway. He moved with the ease of someone who knew every rung and handhold. He checked expansion tanks, traced cooling lines, laid a hand on a pump casing, like greeting an old friend. "Feel this," he told Susan, placing her gloved hand on a pipe. "Hotter than it should be this long after shutdown. That means the heat couldn't get carried away. The water wasn't moving right." He walked to a bolted access plate near the bilge. "Screens are behind here," he said, "between the sea chests and the pumps." The space was cramped, low, and obviously not meant for comfort. He picked up a wrench, hesitated, then looked at Susan. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. It was not doubt about the engines, only about what would follow if he succeeded or failed. I'm sure, she said. While he loosened bolts, she asked, "How many times have you done something like this?" "On this ship?" "Never," he said. "No one wanted me touching main systems, but on tugs, fishing boats, smaller ferries. Too many times to count. The water changes, the kelp changes. Machines don't." He cracked the plate open. A wave of hot, damp air, heavy with the stink of rotting seaweed, burst out. He coughed, dark eyes narrowing. "There it is," he said. Peering into the opening, Susan saw only black, tangled mass. Kelp, plastic trash, even a piece of fishing net were packed against the internal screens. "That's what your certified mechanic would find," Daniel said, "after 12 hours of drift and a $70,000 tow." He set to work. For the next hour, he pulled armful after armful of slimy seaweed and debris from the intake, stuffing it into buckets. Sweat rolled down his face and neck. He stopped only to wipe his eyes, then went back in. The cramped position made his shoulders ache, his fingers cramped from gripping and pulling. Up on the bridge, the chief mate called down periodically. "Intake pressure rising, temp stable, no leaks detected." Blackstone paced in circles, watching the drift vector, watching the AIS display of oncoming commercial traffic. Every time a container ship icon appeared on the edge of the radar screen, he felt his stomach twist. In the passenger lounge, people sat on the floor, clustered around phone outlets that didn't work, murmuring anxiously. Crew handed out water and blankets. Daniel's daughter Sophia sat among them, hand on her swollen stomach, eyes fixed on the deck above as if she could see through it. "Engine room," the chief called finally, voice carrying both hope and tension. "Status?" "Intake's clear," Daniel replied, breathing hard. "Lines are flushed. No visible leaks. I'm at the port engine panel." "Copy," the mate said. "Bridge is ready." Daniel wiped his hands quickly, dried his grip, and laid his fingers on the familiar start button. He closed his eyes for a second, almost a prayer, then opened them and spoke into the intercom. "Port main engine restart attempt 1, he said. "Everyone clear. Let's bring her back." He pressed the button. The engine turned. Once, twice, a cough like an old smoker waking up. Then a deep, steady rumble as 12 cylinders came alive, shaking the floor beneath his boots. The sound filled the engine room, a heartbeat returning. On the bridge, a low cheer broke out. The port engine indicator flipped from red to green. RPMs climbed to idle. "Cooling?" the chief asked. "Temps rising, then stabilizing," a junior officer said. "Flow looks good. No alarms." "Engine room, how's she feel?" asked Blackstone, unable to stop himself. "She's happy," Daniel replied, and there was something like joy in his voice. 10 minutes later, the starboard engine roared to life as well. Both engines at idle, both cooling systems stable. "Susan," Blackstone said quietly, "if he pulls this off, I'll write a love letter to whatever agency sent you." She said nothing, eyes on the data. Inside, she was thinking about narratives, about who got called professional and who got called lucky. "Engine room, stand by," she heard herself say. "Bridge is taking propulsion." Blackstone eased the controls forward. The Island Queen vibrated, then began to move, bow slowly swinging away from the shipping lane vector. The radar showed their symbol bending back towards safety. On deck, passengers felt the change, a tiny shift underfoot, a new hum through the deck. People looked at each other, then toward the windows. Someone shouted, "We're moving!" Relief surged through the cabins like an invisible wave. Phones lifted, even if there was no signal. People cried, laughed, prayed. In the engine room, Daniel leaned against the railing, sweat cooling on his skin as he watched the gauges. The engines purred at cruise RPM, temperatures perfect, pressures healthy. He closed his eyes briefly, listening to the rhythm he knew as well as his own heartbeat. By the time he climbed back up to the bridge, the shoreline was noticeably closer. Tugs were no longer racing toward them, they had been stood down. He stepped onto the bridge, suddenly self-conscious in his grime-stained coveralls in the clean, controlled space of officers and clipboards. Blackstone turned. For a moment, neither man said anything. Then the captain cleared his throat. "Mr. Rodriguez," he managed, "I owe you—" Before he could finish, Susan stepped forward. "Before we hand out thanks," she said, unclipping her vest, "I need to clarify something." She removed the Coast Guard vest, set the visitor badge on the table, and pulled out a different ID wallet from her pocket. She opened it and laid it in front of the captain and mate. It was not a Coast Guard ID. It carried the emblem of the Regional Ferry Authority, and beneath it, the title Executive Director. "My name is not Susan Chen," she said. "It's Margaret Rodriguez. I am the new head of this ferry system." The bridge went completely still. "I boarded as an observer 3 weeks ago," she continued. "I wanted to see how our ships really sail, how our crews really operate, without the performance that comes when you know the boss is watching." She looked at Daniel. His eyes widened, a flash of recognition and confusion crossing his face. "Rodriguez?" the mate murmured. "You two are—" "Cousins," Margaret said. "Our fathers fished together when they were boys, but that's not why I'm here." She turned back to the captain. Her voice, while calm, carried an edge that made even seasoned officers straighten. "Today, I watched this crew face a serious emergency," she said. "I watched a licensed master focus more on contracts, credentials, and liability than on practical solutions. I watched him mock the most experienced man in the engine room because his uniform didn't come with bars." Blackstone opened his mouth. "I acted in accordance with—" "You acted out of fear," she cut in. "Fear of lawyers, fear of inspectors, fear of blame. And then, when pushed by someone you thought was Coast Guard, you reluctantly allowed a man you have ignored for 19 years to do the work you were too cautious to authorize." She gestured toward the window, toward the shoreline drawing nearer. "You are alive, and so are your passengers, because a deckhand refused to accept your limitations." Silence. "Captain Richard Blackstone," Margaret said. "Effective upon arrival, you are relieved of command of this vessel. You'll report to headquarters for a hearing on your future with this company." Blackstone's face went slack. For a second, he looked much older. "Ma'am," he started. "I'm not interested in excuses on this bridge," she said. "You'll have plenty of time later." She turned to Daniel. He was still processing the reveal. His hands, burned, scarred, still smelling faintly of seawater and oil, hung awkwardly at his sides. "Daniel," she said, and her voice softened for the first time. "Do you remember my father's old boat, the Estrella?" He blinked, then nodded slowly. "We used to play on her deck when we were kids," he said. "He let me steer once, got me in trouble with my own father." She smiled briefly. "He told me something about you a long time ago," she said. "He said, that boy listens to engines the way a priest listens to confessions. One day, ships will owe him their lives, and he'll probably still be the one sweeping the floor." Daniel laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "He was right about the first part," she said, "not about the second." She reached into her bag and produced a folder. Inside was a contract already signed on the authorities' side. "The board has approved a new position, Chief Marine Engineer and Technical Trainer," she said, "fleet-wide. Someone needs to capture the knowledge that lives only in people like you before it disappears. Someone needs to make sure we stop treating experience as disposable." She handed him the folder. "It comes with proper pay, $95,000 a year to start. Full benefits, and the authority to stop a sailing if your gut says something's wrong, even if the computer says everything's fine." Daniel looked at the papers, then at her, then around the bridge. The officers stared, some envious, some ashamed, some quietly pleased. I don't have a college degree," he said. "I know," she said. "If I wanted degrees, I could fill this role 5 times over. I want the man who just restarted 2 engines with nothing but a wrench, his hands, and 19 years of listening." He swallowed hard. "What if I mess it up?" She shrugged slightly. "Then you'll fix it," she said. "That's what you've always done." He looked down at his hands. They shook slightly. For years he had dreamed in quiet moments of being seen, of being more than Rodriguez down below. That dream had seemed childish, something you grow out of when life shows you your place. Sophia appeared in the doorway, one hand on the frame, the other on her belly. Her eyes were wet. "Dad," she whispered, "they told us what you did." He turned, suddenly more unsteady than he had been in the cramped manifold space. "You okay?" he asked, voice breaking. "We're okay," she said, "because of you." He turned back to Margaret, eyes shining. "You're sure this isn't just a thank you while the cameras are on us?" he asked. There were no cameras, but the question was real. "This is a correction," she said. "Long overdue. My father built this system on the backs of people like you. Somewhere along the way, we started trusting screens more than hands. That ends now." Daniel took a deep, shuddering breath. Then, "Yes," he said, "I accept. I'll do my best not to let you down." "You already didn't," she replied. He sank to one knee, overwhelmed, then caught himself, embarrassed. Margaret stepped forward and pulled him back up. "Stand up, Chief," she said. "You've spent enough of your life on your knees in bilges for this company." Laughter rippled around the bridge, easing tension at last. Months later, passengers boarding the Island Queen never knew what had happened that day. They saw only polished decks, clean uniforms, and a plaque on the bulkhead near the engine room stairwell. In honor of Daniel Rodriguez, whose hands brought this ship home when every instrument said no. Down below in the engine room, a different culture was forming. Young mechanics shadowed Daniel, not just learning which buttons to press, but when not to trust them. They learned to hear when a bearing was complaining, to smell coolant before a leak registered, to feel the difference between a healthy vibration and a warning. Every morning before the first start, Daniel walked alone between the engines. He rested his palm on the port block, then the starboard, feeling the metal's coolness, the potential energy waiting inside. "Buenos dias, viejos," he would whisper. "Let's take them home safe today." Then he would climb to the control panel, eyes flicking over gauges, ears tuned to the subtle sounds of pumps and fans. An old deckhand finally called what he had been all along, the man who kept the heart of the ship beating.